Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss the potential, some even think very likely, if not inevitable, prospect of a trade war between the UK and the EU, with the Northern Ireland Protocol being used as an excuse through the lens of possible benefits in a general election campaign. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the next in this series of the Northern Ireland Protocol, again this week, where all the strands seem to be coming together. And this time it's based on a notion that someone tweeted about. Someone pointed out a tweet thread to me at the weekend, though I've noticed they've since deleted the thread. Not sure why. But the general idea is that Boris Johnson may deliberately trigger a trade war with the EU in order to create a rally round the leader moment, shore up public support, then trigger a general election, get the majority back, and then you've got 5 more years before you have to worry about another one. Now, I don't agree with the general concept, for which I'll give reasons, but I do think the reasoning may determine timing rather than motivation. Now, I've already discussed the concept of the Conservatives wanting a very early general election, like within the next year. Put briefly, Brexit is going to continue destroying our standard of living. That's just a fact. The cost of food, energy and fuel is going to keep rising. The shortages are also going to keep biting. We've already seen shortages of food. That is now permanent, by the way, whilst we persist with our hard Brexit. That's all there is to it. You go to the supermarket, there's going to be shortage of things. You'll be able to get food. We're not saying it's going to be like the eastern side of the Iron Curtain where you go in and maybe there's a can of sweet corn there. No, there will be food, but it won't always be the food you wanted, that you could reliably get in the past. That's just permanent now. We've also had a taste of petrol shortages. Now, they will come and go, inevitably. We have yet to experience electricity shortages. We're just paying a lot more for it, but that too may come our way. Over time, people will increasingly see that these things are now becoming a part of life in Britain. They're not teething problems, they're not short-term effects, they're just how life in Britain is now. And I know the public have very short memories, but I'm pretty sure they will remember when they had reliable access to food, fuel and electricity and decide that they'd rather like it back again. The government would ideally like to have a general election while they're still convincing people that the problems are short-term and will be over shortly. Problem is that the government are probably no longer popular enough. They gained a lot from the pandemic, perversely, but right now they're in no shape to fight a general election. Not saying they definitely lose, of course not. They might well win. What I am saying is that it would be too great a risk for them. Too much in the balance. But we all know the power of rally round the leader at times of conflict. We saw it with Margaret Thatcher and the Falklands War. We saw it with George Bush Jr. and his Middle Eastern war. Boris Johnson may be eyeing up a similar boost from a war with the EU, albeit a trade war. Yes, the difference is the EU haven't actually attacked us, but that can soon be arranged. If we suspend parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol, the EU would have to retaliate. They'd have to. Indeed, they prepared the Trade and Cooperation Agreement with the capacity to do this specifically for such an eventuality. Like our main Brexit trade deal, the one we agreed last December, is highly unique in several ways. Not just in representing a divergence of trade between the two parties, but in allowing for unilateral corrective action in the event that one side changes things in order to gain a competitive advantage over the other. This isn't normal. Suspending the protocol would do this, and the EU would be allowed to impose tariffs on British exports. You know, to the EU, of course. All perfectly legal, all above board. And you can see the logic. You know, the polling from the Conservatives is stubbornly stable right now. Despite weekly crises, they just never seem to lose unpopularity. This will be down, for those who are mystified, in no small part to the general success of their culture wars. Like, if Brexit was seen purely in terms of economic terms, it would be seen as a very clear failure by the public. You know, there are anti-Brexit voices that keep declaring Brexit has failed and can't work out why the public don't see it. The problem is that for too many of the public, Brexit is not about wealth or freedoms or any of the things that were sold to them. It's about their way of life being threatened. It's the war on woke. Never mind that these people are actually losing their way of life. They aren't seeing the wood for the trees, as they say. But this concept only seems to be keeping the Conservatives' popularity stable at the moment. A little boost could see them ready to fight a general election. They don't need much of one and be likely to win another majority, albeit a smaller one. So, the government suspend the protocol, something that most of the public don't know anything about. People don't really understand that there's issues in trade between Britain and Northern Ireland. It's not reported. So the EU slapped tariffs on our goods, threatening British jobs. Oh, the media will report that. Oh, they'll absolutely hammer that. The EU are made to look like they are punishing the UK for leaving. It'll not be tied in with what we've done in terms of acting in bad faith with the protocol. No. This will be the EU punishing us for leaving. Johnson creates his enemy. People rally around the leader. The logic seems straightforward, doesn't it? Assuming that the public would fall for it. And there's a very strong possibility that they would, of course. Then I do remember last December when France closed its border to us due to concerns over the Kent variant. We now call it the Alpha variant. The public didn't blame France for that. They blamed the government. And the government suffered in the polls quite badly. But that's not my main reason for going along with this line of thinking exactly as stated. It's that even if the Conservatives weren't all that bothered about a general election now, even if they felt that this situation will have significantly improved by 2023 or 2024, they would still be wanting to suspend the protocol anyway. The Northern Ireland Protocol represents a serious threat to Brexit. Not just the Conservatives, to Brexit. Not because of the trade barriers it places between Britain and Northern Ireland. They don't care about that. There are far worse barriers between Britain and our main export markets. There's no complaints from Brexiteers about those, are there? Apart from the ones who's losing their businesses. What they care about is that Northern Ireland are riding the current crises way better than we are in Britain. We talk about food shortages. Not in Northern Ireland. Talk about petrol shortages. No, not in Northern Ireland. CO2 shortages. No, not there either. Reduction in the value of exports. No, Northern Ireland's economy is doing rather well as it happens. It is uniquely placed to be able to export to both Britain and the EU without trade barriers. And the more the crises keep coming, the more we'll be able to point out that the severe consequences of these crises are only affecting Britain. Not just the UK, Britain. Ministers at the moment are claiming that these things are being felt across Europe. They are not. At some point, people will have to see that. It's just Britain, not the whole UK, just Britain, the part of the UK that diverged from the EU. Northern Ireland cannot be allowed to maintain this special arrangement. Has nothing to do with sovereignty, nothing to do with economics, it is ideology. Northern Ireland is showing Brexit up in front of its friends. At the moment, not enough of the British public, especially in England, are aware of this. Over time, more people inevitably will be. That's why I don't think this is motivated by a general election. Even without the need for the election, Brexit needs to destroy the Northern Ireland Protocol. If they can't stop Britain suffering from the severe consequences of Brexit, and they can't, then they have to make sure that Northern Ireland suffers just as much. You cannot have a situation where two parts of the UK, one part is suffering very badly, one part is not, and the part that's not is the part that stayed aligned to the EU. Their project depends upon this in the long term. They cannot rely upon the gaslighting working forever. It never does. But although I don't think this is the motivation for attacking the protocol and triggering a trade war with the EU, it might help determine the timing. Because if, as is believed, Boris Johnson has already decided that he's going to trigger this trade war, why hasn't he yet? David Frost claims that the conditions for suspending it have existed for months now. So why hasn't it been triggered yet? Can only be two possibilities. Either they are bluffing, or they are waiting for the optimum time. Our capacity to withstand a trade war with the EU isn't going to get better over time. They can't be thinking, well, let's just wait until this time, then it should be better. There isn't going to be a better time. As more shortages bite more keenly, the concept of a trade war just becomes more damaging. So it might be that they want to trigger the suspension to get maximum benefit for something else. Maybe aim to have the general election coincide with an expected peak of public support for the government. but before the trade war bites too hard? If so, this might suppose that they will trigger the suspension next year, after months more kicking the can down the road, maybe in time for a summer election. Or they could trigger it at the end of this month and push for an election in December. But I think that would be very risky for them. Well, the two things may have nothing to do with each other, but those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. Until next time, I'll see you later.